everyone, how are you feeling today? It's Eros everyone here, and today I'm coming to you with my Monarch deck profile. Now this deck profile is really fun. It's probably one of my favorites back in the day, and I'm so happy it's got Ether back to 2. Now I know everybody else also do that right now and do a deck profile for Monarchs, but I love them as well, so I felt like why not give you guys my take on them, which is very important to me. This deck is very strong, at least it was back in the day. It was so powerful that even though it has kind of a restriction to don't run extra deck monsters, people found a variant that gave him the ability to run extra deck monsters as well. That shows you how strong this deck is, and like that deck was also insane. So that's really cool, and we're going to jump right into it. After I'm going to say that, like, for anybody who asks, yes, there's going to be an update video like I promised really soon. But I just want to reach 750 subscribers before I do that, just because I feel like it will be a cool number to do that. So yeah, without further ado, let's jump right into it. So starting things off with the new card of the list, or at least two, like at least one copy of the list. We run 2 copies of Ether, the most important lady in the deck, which is, by the way, if you didn't notice, she's a lady. This card is really powerful. All of the level 8 monarchs have the effect if they tribute summon on a tribute summon they can tribute summon on a tribute summon monster, and they only need one of it. So for example, if I'm using Ether on an Ether that was tribute summon, I get to pretty much use only that, and I don't need to use 2 monsters. So it's pretty cool. Its main effect and main functionality is that you get to send a monarch spells and trap, 2 of them from your deck or hand to the graveyard, and then you get to special summon a monster with 2400 or more attack and 1000 defense from your deck, which is really strong. It has the functionality to like even summon itself, which is really powerful, and then you get it to your hand. And you might think to yourself, why is that important? Because during, of course, I forgot to say, during the end phase, you get to add, you have to pretty much get that card that you summon from the deck to your hand. And you might, once again, I said, why do you want to pretty much get this back to your hand by summoning this to summon this? Well, it has an effect to pretty much during your opponent's turn, you can banish a monster, a monarch spell and trap from your graveyard, and as a quick effect, you get to tribute this card from your hand. So for example, you have this in your hand, you get, you have this one on the field, you can banish a monarch spell and trap from your graveyard, and then you get to tribute this on it, send 2 additional monarch spells and traps, and get to summon 2 monsters, which is really nice. And you have 1 or 2 cards that essentially can interrupt, even though they're giving your opponent a card to draw, but it's still an interruption, so it's not the worst thing in the world. And it's also giving you a tribute summon monster if you feel like your opponent is going to tribute over your card, so that's really nice in that regard as well. Moving forward, for the second best monarch in the deck, I run 3 copies, of Erebus. Erebus is pretty much the same idea of Ether in the fact that like you need to send 2 monarch spells and trap from hand or deck to activate an effect, and his effect is to pick one of the Trishula effects. Either shuffle a card, but instead of banish, it's shuffle to the deck. So you either shuffle a card from the graveyard, shuffle a card from the field, or shuffle a card from the hand to your opponent's deck, which is really powerful. His graveyard effect, however, is that when he's in the graveyard, you get to send a monarch, a spell and trap from your hand to the graveyard, and then you get to pretty much add a monster with 2400 or more attack to your hand and 1000 defense to your hand, which is really powerful. And Erebus, in my opinion, it's one of the best cards that ever got printed to Monarchs. So it's so powerful. Ether is definitely the best, but like this is also really strong. And one thing I forgot to say about the Monarchs, except from the little squires that they got, all of them are not the harder ones per turn, just to let you guys know. Moving forward, for the 2 flexible monarchs, can be whatever you want. You can even cut one of them and make Majesty's Fiend. I specifically don't have Majesty's Fiend, so unfortunately it's a problem for me. But like you can also have that in additional. But the 2 cards that I choose for this is one Festalos and 1 Caius. Festalos is just to have another copy of a card that just pretty much discard a card of your opponent's hand, which is really nice. And Caius is just to have a card that banish on the field. They both have the same effect of like if you use their own tribute summon attribute. So for example, if you use for this one Erebus, you get to activate his effect to pretty much banish one card on the field, inflict damage to your opponent 1,000, and if it's a dark monster, you get to pretty much banish all copies whenever they are, even extra deck. And of course, if you use attributed dark monster, you get to banish 2 cards. This one, on the other hand, doesn't really matter. If you use fire, you just inflict 1,000 more damage, but this one just pretty much snipe a card off your opponent's hand to the graveyard. Another option for this, like I said, like I recommend to run like 7 copies of big monarchs, because I also run like one additional monarch, like run like 6 or 7 like 2,400 attack monsters and 1,000 defense or more in the attack department, because it's like you need to see those, because some of the spell and traps actually work with that. So you need to see some of them in your hand, like have a kind of a way to see them. So I decided to go with this. If you have Majesty's Fiend, you might don't want to run this card, and you want to run Majesty's Fiend instead. Also, you can run, instead of one of these, Mobius, because Mobius is really strong in my opinion right now, because it lets you deal with back row, which is really, really powerful in that regard as well. So if, for example, you don't want the Caius, you can run the Mobius, or vice versa. Lastly, for the Monarchs, I run 1 copy of Karaz. Karaz is actually really, really strong. He has the effect of like when this card is normal or special summon, so you don't have to use his effect of like you get to tribute him on something. You get to target up to 2 cards on the field, destroy those targets, and if you do, each player can draw 1 card for each card they control that was destroyed. Now it sounds a little bit bad, but sometimes you need to destroy your own cards to draw something else, or you want to destroy your opponent's cards in order to push for game, or just you don't like the monsters that they got for a combo or whatever, and you know that they're not be able to come back with that, with the card that they drew, so that's really nice for that regard as well. Now, of course, if you're playing against Solomon Greats, it's actually the worst thing to do, because they can recover really easily, even though their cards are kind of limited right now. It's actually, they're still running around, so for them it's actually kind of bad, but for other decks, it's actually really strong, because they're kind of don't really have an extra deck after they finish their combo. So yeah, it's actually really powerful in that regard. Moving on to the small Squires, which is really nice and very strong cards for the deck. I run 3 copies of Adus and 3 copies of Idea. These 2 cards are just absolutely insane. Idea is pretty much the ones that you want to summon. If you know how special summon her, you get to special summon a monster with 800 attack and 1000 defense from your deck, which is then going to be this guy. And then if you activate this effect, you cannot special summon monsters from the extra deck. And then its other effect is pretty much you get to send, if it's get to send to the graveyard, you get to add banished monarch spell and trap from your graveyard back to your hand, which is really, really powerful. Eidos, on the other hand, effect is, its first effect is not the ones that restrict you from the extra deck, which is pretty much if it's summoned, you get to get another normal summon for a tribute summon, which is really, really cool. Another normal summon for tribute summon, and then its effect in the graveyard, which is the ones that restrict you. You get to banish a copy of him from the graveyard to special summon Idea from the deck, because it's a 800 attack monster and 1000 defense. So that's real nice in that regard. And these 2 cards are just really strong engine that help to the deck move quite a bit. Now, there's another Squire that I kind of like consider running, which is Mothra. I believe the one for the Vassal. The ones that like for the original 6 are called Vassals, and it's the one for Zaborg, I believe. She really powerful, but the problem is she give your opponent a token. So even if you get to tribute summon over her and then you get another tribute summon, it's kind of doesn't worth it. So I'm not sure about her, but you might want to run her. And then the last monster I run is 3 copies of Vanity's Fiend. If you have Majesty's Fiend, I recommend to run it, but you all know what Vanity's Fiend does, which is kind of like limiting special summon. And the only problem with this card in the deck, and that's why I run multiples, is because he has 200 more defense than he needs to have. If he had 1,000, I probably will get away by running only 2, and it'll be even more broken for the deck. So that's it for the monsters. Now move on to the spells. Spells, 3 copies of the main of the True Monarchs. This card is absolutely insane. If you have no extra deck and you have a tribute summon monster, your opponent cannot special summon a monster from the extra deck, which is really, really powerful. And then its other effect is, the one that matters most of the time, is pretty much you get to reduce a monster with 2800 or 1000 defense level by 2 for the rest of the turn, and then you can just pretty much tribute summon it with 1 less tribute, which is really strong in my opinion. And the other effect is like, you pretty much get to, the secondary effect is like, if it's attacks, you get to, and it's tribute summon monster, you get to give that monster for damage calculation 800 attack, which is really, really nice. So that's why I'm saying, like, sometimes these decks can be OTK. And because of that, like, because we don't have Pantheism at 3, and because of the today format, this card is absolutely important, and you want to see this card as soon as possible with your Monarch spells and traps, because this is your lock card. It's really, really important. Moving on, we're on 3 copies of Tenacity. This is the reason why you need in your hand a Monarch, because you need to reveal a monster with 2400 and 1000 defense, or 28 and 1000 defense, which is really, really important. And then you get to pretty much add a Monarch spell and trap from your deck to your hand, except itself. So yeah, it's pretty much 3 Rota for your spells and traps. Then you run 3 copies of Return. Return is just really, really nice. If you tribute summon a monster, you get to either add the 2400 or 2800 and 1000 defense. It's just really, really nice for that regard. It's just pretty simple, and unfortunately, because we don't have Pantheism at 3, I still think like this card is pretty necessary, but maybe in the future I will cut it down to 2 or even 1, because right now we kind of need this card, so yeah. And then for your last 3 off, you run 3 copies of the Monarch Stormforth. The Monarch Stormforth is really powerful with with Ether, because you can just pretty much, it's a quick play spell effect. You activate it during your opponent's turn as well, and then you can pretty much use one of their monsters for tribute summon this turn, which is really, really strong. Because you can just pretty much like set this, activate it, use one of their monsters to tribute summon for your Ether, so you get rid of their monster, which is really, really powerful. And then you can just pretty much like, get another monster on the field, or even 2 monsters on the field. So this is just a really, really nice disruption. It's not the harder ones per turn, which is really, really strong. Then for the 2 one-offs, for the Monarch spells and traps, I run 1 spells at least. I run 1 copy of Pantheism, and 1 copy of the March of the Monarchs. These cards are really, really nice. March of the Monarchs is probably a cuttable card, but I love this card because of the ideas of like it's protect your monsters. So it's pretty nice to protect your monster from targeting effects, which is pretty much one of the biggest things today. Pantheism is also really, really powerful. You get to pretty much send this with another Monarch spell and trap to the graveyard, and then you get to draw 2 cards, which is really, really powerful. And then, this is not 100 once per turn, but the better effect is, like, when it's in the graveyard, you get to reveal 3 Monarch spells and traps to your opponent, and then you get to add 1 of them to your hand. So, like, on average, like, if you open up with this card, you're kind of, like, going to have 7 cards in your hand. If, like, you're going second, if you're going first, it's pretty much like a +1 all the time, which is really, really powerful. But it's so powerful that like sometimes I'm actually really want to see this card in the graveyard just to get it to my hand and then just like get it back with idea. So it's really, really strong, and in my opinion, like when this card is going to come back to 3, the deck is going to shine so much. I'm not saying it's like it will become meta, but like the deck will become so much consistent. Like this card is absolutely insane. And then for the one-offs, 1 copy of Reinforcement of the Army, 1 copy of Foolish Burial, 1 copy of Foolish Burial Goods, and then 1 copy of 1 for 1. This is for idea. This is for idea. This is pretty much see the spell or trap that you want in the graveyard. Most of the time it's going to be Pantheism. And this one is just Foolish Burying either Eidos or any other ones that you pretty much want in the grave. And that's pretty much does it for the spells. Now we'll move on to the traps. So for the traps, you run 2 copies of the Monarch Erupt, 2 copies of the Prime Monarchs, and 1 copy of Escalation of the Monarchs. Now, Escalation is a card I could see people here cut down, but I really like this card because it's giving you the ability to just tribute during your opponent's turn, and pretty much because of that, you can kind of like get away with like really cool effects for like Caius or or not Mobius, or even or Thestalos, or any other big monarchs that you want, which is really strong. The Prime Monarch is just self-explanatory too. You get a banish spell, monarch spell trap from the graveyard, special summon this, and if it's on the field, flips face up for like being a continuous trap. You pretty much get to shuffle 2 monarchs, spell a trap from your graveyard, and then draw a card, which is really nice. But the real star of the trap show, which that's why I'm kind of like consider maybe cutting some cards to kind of like add a third one of this, is the Monarch Erupt, because it's pretty much skill drain for tribute summon monsters. It's just absolutely insane. This card is so ridiculous. It's a skill drain for tribute summon monsters, and it can stay on the field with that effect until your next end phase, even if your opponent get rid of one of your monarchs. It's absolutely ridiculous. Like, I'm just gonna say it out loud. This card is absolutely ridiculous. So that's pretty much it, and that does it for the Monarch deck profile. This is my list, of course. If you have anything that you would like to change, you're more than welcome to let me know in a comment down below. There are some cards here I'm like, yeah, I maybe want to run them, yeah, maybe I don't want to run them, but I feel like this is the more like, you know, vanilla version of Monarch. Is pretty much the normal version, and I love this version quite a bit. And yeah, this is one of my favorite decks, probably one of my favorite decks of all time. It's probably one of my first ones when I kind of like, you know, build a structure deck when I came back to the game. It took me a while, but like when it came out is like one of the time that I actually came back to the game, like the game full strength. So like it's very important to me in that regard as well. So yeah, that's for that. So hope you guys enjoy. We'll see you guys in the next video. And remember, creativity is the key in this game. Have a good day, guys. Stay safe, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye.